Okay, we are being recorded. I'm going to go through the presentation, so we will start. The first thing that I have is just a quote. It's from Harry Wong's The First Day of School. It's effective teachers manage their classrooms while ineffective teachers discipline their classrooms. So today I'm hoping to give you some new tools in your toolbox to manage your classroom as opposed to discipline your classroom. When we are disciplining students, students are able to do the behaviors we don't want. So with management, we are trying to get to where students are not displaying the behaviors that we do not want in our classrooms. So instead, we're doing all the work preventatively as opposed to disciplinary or reactionary. So the questions that I'm going to answer today are, what steps can I take to manage my classroom and encourage appropriate behavior? The agenda for today, I'll go through the presentation and I'm going to show you the resources that I have pulled for this presentation. And then after we go through the presentation and the resources, I'll open it up for discussion and Q&A. So at that point in time, you can unmute the Zoom for any live questions. And then after all the live questions have been answered, I'll go through the chat and work through the questions that are in the chat. So with that being said, some norms for today. One, please mute your sound during this presentation. I tried to go through and mute everyone. So hopefully you can not hear all the background noise. And then number two, any questions or comments that you have during this presentation, either write them down in your personal parking lot, sheet of paper, whatever that you have next to you, or use the chat box. The one thing that I found yesterday I'm really bad at is I'm bad at managing the chat box and presenting at the same time. So just know that I'm not looking at that chat box. So anything that's put into there, I will answer and go through at the end of this presentation, okay? So if you have any questions before we start, go ahead and unmute yourself. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me and we're all good to go. Okay, we'll go ahead and get going. So today we're going to talk about a three-step approach for encouraging classroom behavior. Number one, we're going to look at building personal relationships and some strategies that we can do to building personal relationships. Number two, we're going to talk about communicating expectations and some strategies in that. And number three, we're going to talk about using our time and space effectively. So in building personal relationships, number one is get to know your students. And this is a strategy, the 2x10 strategy, that basically is you spend 2 minutes a day for 10 days having student-led conversations. You could find out what their favorite food is. You could discuss the hobbies that they might have. You might be talking about athletic events. Maybe they're wearing a Chiefs shirt and you say, oh, did you watch the Chiefs Super Bowl? Or did you watch the parade on line? Or did you go, what'd you have for dinner last night? Do you like eating that? And then you would just have those conversations. You just let the kiddo have the conversation that they want to have, and you follow through on that for 2 minutes, and then you do that for 10 days. After your 10 days, you can either repeat the process with other students. So what I've had people do, I've had teachers do, is they've gone through their entire classroom at the beginning of the school year, and then they do it again a couple times, just so they can build relationships with all those kiddos. Or you target specific kids that might need some additional attention or some additional support in just getting to know them, so you have some more resources, some more understanding of that student. The resource that I shared for that, I'm going to switch PowerPoints here, is this 1 minute in service. It takes a minute, learn a lot. And it talks about the 2x10 strategy for dealing with difficult students. So this specifically talks about working for those kiddos that are specifically in that tier 2, tier 3 kind of situation, who would really need to have some targeted intervention. I also feel like this could be a tier 1 strategy, especially when you have a new classroom in your class, or you are maybe coming back from some breaks and you want to re-engage with your students. So it can be used either way to target that tier 2, tier 3, or to be a tier 1 strategy. Okay. So we'll go back. The next one that we're going to talk about is being courteous. And I know that every teacher walks into their classroom wanting to be courteous and kind and nice to their students. But in the hubbub of a classroom, I think sometimes we forget about this. The other piece about being courteous is that students take in what our body language and our tone, volume, and cadence way more than our actual words, which is why Zoom has become so difficult for me, because I can't actually see you guys, I can't engage with you, so I'm just kind of sitting here talking. I'm not taking in your body language to determine when I need to move on, or do I need to pause and talk about this more. So taking out that body language is why Zoom is so difficult. But when you're in your classroom, your kiddos are watching you and they are taking in your body language. So the problem with body language is what is sometimes presented is not what's always perceived. Think about the resting not nice face for that. And so that person looks maybe angry or unengaged or disinterested, when really maybe that's just how their face is presented when it's at rest. So the problem with body language, again, is sometimes we aren't aware of what our body language is putting out into the universe, and people perceive whatever they think. So the next one is check your tone, volume, and cadence. Again, kids take a lot of emotion from our tone, volume, and cadence, and not so much our words. You could be saying the nicest thing ever, but if your tone, volume, and cadence doesn't match that, they're taking in the emotion from your tone and your volume and cadence. The other day I was walking into a school and I could hear from across the parking lot that a teacher was very upset that the kiddos were not lining up to go in from recess. And I knew that from her tone and her volume, not really the words she said. I couldn't tell you exactly the words she said because that wasn't what was imprinted in my mind. It was what the tone and the volume that she was using that was imprinted in my mind, that she meant business and she really wanted those kids to line up. So again, it's not the words that you use, it's really about how you say it. So we can change the climate of our classroom by just really watching our tone, volume, and cadence and our body language. With that being said, the third strategy here is to model the attitudes and interactions we want. When we are modeling the things that we want, we get more of that. So if I am watching my tone, volume, and cadence and my body language, and that's what I'm putting out into my classroom, that's what I'm gonna get more of. So instead of using my words to tell kids that I want them to be kinder to each other, or I want them to talk more respectful, I need to model that. I can't really use the words that I have. I need to be able to model that through my tone, volume, and cadence, and my body language. Okay. The third one is be present. And obviously, if you are sitting in a classroom, you are present in that classroom. But why I put this in here is because, yes, we are in that classroom, but we're thinking about the math lesson that I need to teach. We're thinking about the science materials that I need to pull together. And sometimes I don't think we're actually emotionally present. We might be physically present, but we're not really in the moment thinking about the emotions that are in our classroom. So with that being said, the strategy that I put in here is active listening. So when you have a kiddo who might start seeming like they're maybe starting to be disruptive, or they're starting to withdraw from the lesson, maybe active listening is a strategy we could use. And for that, I gave you the acronym of CLASS. So CLASS is the acronym for active listening. The C is clarify using restatement. So that would just be that paraphrasing back. So what I hear you saying is, or what I think you're trying to tell me, those kind of statements to paraphrase back to what that kiddo is saying. With that being said, part of that paraphrasing is we're looking to listen for the real message. What I hear you saying is, and you paraphrase what you think they're trying to say, because sometimes what they are saying is not really the message that they're trying to give. The A is avoid assumptions, remain non-judgmental. Perception is reality for this, and so if a child perceives something, then that is their reality, and we need to remain non-judgmental. Yes, Johnny maybe threw his math book on the floor, but we need to understand the reality of that behavior for Johnny, not what our reality was. The first S is silence. Silence is a difficult skill for Americans in general. It means that we have to wait and we have to allow for some uncomfortable moments. Silence is very hard for us. We like noise. We like to hear the TV playing. We like to hear the music playing. We like to fill in moments of silence and conversation. And I am horrible at this. If I see a moment of conversation, I'm going to just jump in with my opinion or feelings or the thing that I was thinking about that I wanted to tell you. I don't necessarily always allow for that silence for somebody to think through what they're really trying to say. But it is amazing when you pause between turn takings and conversation, that child might have that ability to reprocess what they're saying and might then allow for themselves to really clarify their own restatement or add in something that maybe they would not have added had you not allowed for that silence. And then the final S is stay in the moment, provide that undivided attention. I completely understand that in a classroom of 30 kiddos, when you're trying to teach science and you're trying to teach math and you're trying to do this and you're trying to do that and you've got 30 emails in your inbox, that providing undivided attention is really not a premium for your time. But sometimes if you can do that in moments of an escalating situation, it actually will save you time in the long run because you can solve that situation quickly and really dig into what the problem is instead of allowing a situation to escalate and then you have a bigger situation that is taking more time away from your classroom. Okay. The next one in build person relationships is use redirection in a lighthearted manner. With this being said, we all are going to have to do redirection in our classroom. Somebody is going to not know the direction, somebody's going to be off task, somebody's going to blurt out. That is just a natural part of being a human, is that having 25, 30 kids in a classroom, trying to get them all to do one thing, there's going to have to be some kind of redirection needed. With that being said, we want to make sure that we do it in a lighthearted way, monitoring our body language and our tone, volume, and cadence. And then also, we could sometimes use good-natured humor. There are some teachers out there that are fantastic at this. Humor comes naturally to them. They're able to do it in a nice, kind-hearted way. And so they can redirect and make kind of a funny joke about it and be able to avoid an escalating situation. I am not a humor person. I am not funny. So I rely more onto the second one there, which is think back to what students told you about themselves and try to engage them in that topic. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, you know, maybe we have a Chiefs player, Mitchell Schwartz, who I have a kiddo that doesn't want to do math, and maybe I know that they really like Chiefs, so I maybe start talking about the Chiefs player, Mitchell Schwartz, and maybe we can talk about, oh, well, I know you really like the Chiefs. Have you, you know, heard of this player? You know, I think he really likes to do math, and I kind of redirect using a topic that they've talked about that I know that they're into, because then I can kind of re-engage into something that they want to talk about. And then third, we just want to make sure we avoid sarcasm and jargon. Students, even students who have extremely good linguistic skills, don't necessarily understand sarcasm, especially when it comes from an adult. They don't quite understand if we're being sarcastic or if we're not, especially the younger that they are. So we want to make sure we avoid sarcasm. And then, let's face it, in education, we have so much jargon. And so it's really difficult for us as individual teachers to understand the jargon, much less students. So we definitely want to avoid sarcasm and jargon when we're using redirection. It's belittling, and it can really hurt some of those emotional relationships that you've built with kiddos. Okay. So next is communicate expectations. Communicating expectations is one of the tools. If you don't already have this established in your classroom, this would be the tool that I would take back and try to establish into your classroom. So there's 3 ways to establish school and classroom expectations. Number 1 is through school-wide expectation matrices. And here's an example of one. This is one from the Gardner-Edgerton School District. They have their 3 rules are take care of yourself, take care of this place, and take care of others. And they've aligned that with different areas in the school building. So they've talked about in the hallway, taking care of yourself is having a quiet voice, walking feet, walking the straight line. And within this, they have built reinforcement systems and then also consequences for these. Okay. Now in your classroom, you can do the same thing. So either you have a school-wide expectation matrices that you have done as a school, and you can take those and build that into your classroom. Or if you don't have a school-wide, you can do that exact matrices for your own classroom and the routines that you have established in your classroom. When you do that, you can look at your reinforcement systems that you are going to put into place, either again using that school-wide reinforcement system or a reinforcement system that you're going to develop. You can also think about discipline systems. The one thing that I would caution about discipline systems is we want to make sure that they are not belittling. So sometimes when we're calling students out with like clip up and clip down, we want to make sure that they're private discipline systems as opposed to public discipline systems. But a tool that you can use when you're doing your classroom expectation systems is the contingency maps. And this is the reference for the contingency maps. It does say Autism Classroom. The website is an autism website. However, what I really love about it is it's just a visual. And so I use these for when I talk to classrooms and schools about rules, because it's really just a visual and all of us needs visuals. So in this box right here, you would talk about what is the behavior problem, and then you would talk about the behaviors that you want to have happen and what the reinforcers are for those behaviors. And then on the bottom, you could talk about non-examples of that, and then also what would be some discipline consequences of those. The reason that I gave you this resource is that at the bottom, she has a Teachers Pay Teachers website, and then at the bottom, you can click on the link, and she has a PowerPoint of contingency maps that she's already made up, and you can download that PowerPoint and then create your own so that you can put them up in your classroom. I've seen teachers use these as their class rules, and then they just post them like they would post their class rules. Oops. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. So let me try again. Okay. So that's the contingency maps or consequence maps. I've heard them called both. And then finally, when you're teaching school and classroom expectations, we just want to make sure that any student that's on an individual behavior plan, we understand that behavior plan, and that's part of the overall classroom expectations and routines. You take your classroom expectations and routines, and then you make sure that individual behavior plan is being followed within that system. Okay. We already showed that. So then the next one for communicate expectations is make transitions smooth. Transitions are extremely difficult because when you are trying to move 25, 30 bodies from one location to the next, or from one activity to the next activity, there's a lot of room to lose students. And so the more that we can make transitions smooth and keep everyone together in those transitions, the easier they are and the less time is wasted between those transitions. So to do that, we need to, number one, explain. It doesn't matter if it's day 1 or it's day 120. We are going to have to explain the transition. Students, yes, by day 120, they should know what that looks like and what the expectations are. But just because we should know doesn't necessarily mean that we don't need reminders. I use my phone to remind me of things all the time. Yes, I should know that I need to get groceries on Saturday, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't need the reminder to do that of my shopping list. So again, number one is to explain, and to always explain. State what's going to happen, state and explain what the process is going to be of that. And within explain, you could use modeling for students. I love video modeling for teaching and for explaining expectations. So you could video model. You could take some video of students, obviously if you have permission, of them following some of these transitions or some of these routines, and then your explain could be that video modeling of that student doing it. With that being said, number two is rehearse. So you need to have your students practice this. And so the great thing with transitions is we're always transitioning, so there's a lot of practice to have. So you could have a small group of students practice and model for other students after you've had your whole class do that several times. So by day 120, maybe it's 3 kids who maybe struggle with this transition or this routine. You're gonna have them rehearse it for everyone else and demonstrate what those processes are for that transition. And then finally, number 3 is reinforce. We want to give specific positive praise for the behaviors and the parts of those transition routines that are going well. When we reinforce something, we are more likely to get that the next time and the next time and the next time. So we want to make sure we're giving specific positive praise. With that said, we're going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So praise a lot. There are a lot of times that we should be praising that we don't praise. The first bullet there, I said 4 to 1. My last presentation, I said 5 to 1. There's a lot of research. 4 to 1, 5 to 1 is about the magic ratio. And so we want to make sure that we're giving 4 or 5 praise statements to every redirection. And the reason for that is that we kind of look at that magic ratio is because us as Americans and teachers are not super great at giving praise. The reason why is we're problem solvers. And so we're always looking at what can we do to solve a problem. And so if we're trying to solve a problem, we're always looking at the things that aren't going well, instead of what are the things that I want to keep doing that are working for me. It's kind of like weight loss. I'm always trying to lose some weight. So it's like, well, I haven't lost the weight I want to, so I just kind of can the whole thing instead of looking at the specific things that I'm doing well. I feel better when I run. I feel better when I eat well. I just kind of problem solve it and not focus on the things that I enjoy about that process. So we really want to look at the things that are going well. I will also tell you, when I've had teachers try to get to this ratio, a couple of things. One, they say their classroom feels better. They enjoy being in their classroom more. Their students seem to be happier in their classroom. But at the same time, those same teachers have also told me that it kind of feels icky, because to get to that 4 to 1 ratio, we are focusing on something that we aren't usually good at focusing on. So it's a behavioral change for us, and that can kind of feel icky. They feel ingenuine when they're doing it. They kind of feel like they're being more of a comedy stage dramatizing things. But really, to get to that 4 to 1, it takes us being uncomfortable. When you're kind of starting to feel uncomfortable that you're giving so many praise statements, you might be at that 4 to 1. So with that being said, I gave you guys a resource from Vanderbilt on the 4 to 1 specific behavior praise. Vanderbilt has great behavioral strategies, but this is one just kind of 2-sheeter that I gave to you guys about specific praise. And I liked it because it gave some examples of behavior specific praise as opposed to non-examples. So this is a great little 2-sheeter on behavior praise. So when we're talking about praise, we want to make sure that it's immediate to the behavior that we want. If a child has raised their hand instead of blurting out, we don't want to wait till 3 or 4 kids down the line raise their hand to get that praise. We want to give it immediately after the behavior we want. We also want it to be specific. Johnny, thank you for raising your hand. So we want to make sure we call out the student and also the behavior. Now, with that being said, some kids don't like public praise, so you're going to have to kind of know your kids a little bit about that. And so maybe it could just be a thumbs up, or maybe it could be quickly after, just a pat on the back or something more private. So just kind of know your kids. But then finally, it needs to be genuine. You cannot kind of fake praise. You actually have to give genuine praise to this. If you kind of poo-poo it, then it comes off, again, that tone, volume, and cadence, that it's not genuine and it won't work. And it actually might have the opposite effect of praise. You might get a child that emotionally feels like you're not being genuine with them. So the other thing about praise that I really like is called the good behavior game. And there's several ways to play it. You can play it teacher versus student. So you could have blurting be your behavior that you're trying to change, and you have a teacher on the whiteboard and you have a student on the whiteboard. So every time somebody blurts out, the teacher gets a point, but every time a student raises their hand, they get a point. Now, here's the thing about the good behavior game. You want the students to win. So it's not about gotcha. It's not about trying to have the teacher win. It's really about the student, because again, we need to reinforce to increase behavior. So it's really about the students winning. And winning could just be they won, or maybe you have a marble jar, so they get an extra marble, or maybe they get an extra minute of recess, or maybe at high school, they earn points towards a homework pass. So it doesn't really have to be about what they're going to get for that win. It's really about the win. The other good behavior game kind of that I like to play is Secret Student. And that secret student could earn for the class. So it could be maybe before a transition, teachers have different ways of calling students. So they pick out the student that they're going to target. They keep that private in their brain and say, okay, today I'm going to target being quiet in the hallway, or being quiet during math class transition to independent work. And if that student does the behavior, then that student earns a point for the entire class, and that student's name could potentially be revealed to the class if you feel like your class would be beneficial for that. If they don't earn for the class, then you would keep that name private and not spill who that child was. So I gave you guys a resource on the good behavior game. It's quite a long resource. As you can see, it has over 22 pages on it. There has been a lot of research on the good behavior game. KU actually did a study a few years ago in KCK public schools on the good behavior game. This is not from this. This is actually from Ohio. And it just kind of gave some good information. If you ever want information about why the good behavior game works, there's a lot of technical information. I'm happy to share that resource for you. I will give you my email at the end of this presentation, and I would be happy. I kind of geek out over this stuff a little bit, so I'd be happy to share information and talk to you about the more scientific talks about the good behavior game. But there's a lot of research, and this is a great resource to kind of get you started on it. Okay, so next is effective use of time and space. And the first thing is keep students busy. We kind of already talked about transitions or difficult times. And so if we kind of minimize unstructured or wait time, we keep students engaged and we have a better time of moving along in our day without wasted time of then losing a bunch of students that then we're trying to pull back together and get everybody on the same page. So some strategies to do that are have mini challenges. Who can name? So even early childhood through high school, you could have who could name categories that you're working on in your class and talk about all the different vocabulary or concepts that you're talking about in your class. Number two is teach them foreign language. Lots of kids are learning foreign language. I know in some school districts, they learn foreign language in elementary school, so you could target maybe the foreign language that they're learning. Or sometimes it's just interesting to kids to learn about other concepts. So teaching some concepts maybe that they hadn't heard before, or teaching some cultural concepts. Playing I Spy is always fun. Some math facts. The brain crest cards, they have lots of them for different grades. They're fairly easy to carry around. It's a great strategy. Or when I gave this presentation yesterday, somebody talked about the 1-minute mystery books, and she said even middle schoolers, high schoolers love them. They're just like little 1-minute mysteries, and you kind of find out who, what happened in the mystery. And they're just books. She said she bought them on Amazon. So that could be a great resource when you're trying to pack up at the end of the day, or in high school when you have that extra 2 or 3 minutes when kids are packing up, that maybe kids stay a little bit quieter during that time, and they're easier to kind of manage through those unstructured or those wait times. Okay. Finally is Circulate. So again, in classrooms, this is Behavior 101 that you learned in your Bachelor of Teaching. And so it's just that concept is circulate between your students, moving around your students as much as possible. I think we sometimes forget that when we've got into our classrooms, because we have our places in our class that we like to be in. So you might want to like to teach from the whiteboard or from the smartboard. So you need to be at your computer, or you like to do a lot of small groups. So you're at a table or at a science center. And so we kind of forget that we need to be moving around our students as much as possible. So again, just thinking about as your day and how you plan and what your classroom looks like, making sure that you're able to move around. With that being said, if you can't move around, we need to make sure we visually are able to scan the entire room. If you can't see that child, you need to move or they need to move, because I can guarantee the children that you can't see are the kids that you probably need to be able to see. And so you want to make sure that you don't have that where it's kind of hidden or you can't see exactly what they're doing. With that being said, potentially you might need to change your room setup. If you have a hidden corner in your room, I can guarantee the kiddos that you don't want there are the ones that know that's a hidden corner, and they are using that hidden corner. Also, with that being said, flexible seating is great and it is a wonderful tool for a lot of kids, but if you can't visually see the entire room because of the flexible seating or where their seating choices are or what their seating choices are, you can't move, you might need to think about what that flexible seating looks like or how you can manage that a little bit more. Also, for a lot of our kids who have some behavioral challenges, that is the kiddo that you want the closest to you. So finally, using proximity. If you have that child who is having some behavioral challenges, use proximity, either you moving closer to that kid or put that child's seat or desk wherever you spend the most time in your classroom. If you spend the most time doing small groups at a kidney table, you better believe that desk should be close to that kidney table, especially because you don't want to take a time away from your small groups. So you want that child as close to you as possible. So you can either do that by you moving or you moving that child's space closer to you. High school, same way. Middle school, same way. Use that seating chart to make sure those kiddos who might need some more help or some more use of proximity to redirect their behaviors, to make sure they're closest to where you would spend the most time in your day. Okay. So finally is the resources. I am the presenter. I'm Emily Kessler. I'm the behavior specialist for the Gardner-Edgerton School District. So my email is my last name plus my first initial, kesslere@usd231.com. Feel free to email me. I appreciate anybody who's interested in learning more about behavior. I am happy to share. Some other resources that I shared, I did not really talk about the Missouri School-Wide Positive Behavior Support, but I took a lot of information from them. It is a fantastic website. It is free. I know we live on the Kansas side, but all of their stuff is free. If you Google it, they have a ton of worksheets. They also go into discipline and other things that we didn't go into today, but fantastic website, fantastic support. And then the other four that I shared already today, the 2x10 strategy, the contingency maps, for the positive praise, and the good behavior. So with that being said, I'm going to open it up to the Q&A. So if you want to unmute yourself and ask any questions, feel free. If there's nothing of that nature, then I will go through the chat room. So, and I'm going to go ahead and start my video. Anyone have any questions? Okay, I will go through the chat room. Okay, so Sydney shared that we play the secret student in the hallway. Yes, I love that strategy. I had a teacher that did that in Gardner also, and she said that she really liked to play that. And I just realized that my resources didn't show when I screen shared. So I apologize. They are in the resource doc on the Google. When you look at that Google sheet, they are all in the resource doc. So I apologize that they did not share on the presentation. That is the learning curve of Zoom. So like I said, they are all in there, and you can look at those as far as either on this website, and this recording will also be part of that Zoom too. Okay, so if there's not any other questions, I will end. I'm going to stay on for a few more minutes just to answer any additional questions that anybody has, but otherwise that is the end for today, and I really appreciate you guys spending your Sunday afternoon with me. Thank you so much.